Hi everybody, this is Tom Grisak. I'm here with Jeffrey Ellison with Elite Foundations to my right, and then far right is Jason Grisak. How long has Elite been in business?
We've been in business for 6 years. We started in 2018, but I've been doing this nearly 20 years.
Do you have to be licensed to be a foundation company?
Unfortunately, no. There is no such thing as a license in the state of Texas anyway for foundation repair companies. It doesn't exist.
Okay.
There are certifications you can get from the Foundation Repair Association, which is actually run by the owners of foundation companies. So
Okay.
we can certify anybody we want. So
Okay.
no, unfortunately, there's
Right.
no schooling, there's no classes, it's just learn hands-on and go.
Yeah. And because of that, I'm sure you've got some that are very good at what they do, and some of them are very shouldn't be in the business without that any type of certification or training. How do you find out if someone's good, that you'll stand behind them and you guys will recognize them as good?
You know, if you're not calling us, my first thing, everybody says the BBB. I don't like the BBB. I've been in it for a long time. It's a lot more political.
I agree.
Than
It is political, right?
I think the first thing you look for is, do they have a website?
Yeah.
If they have a website, at least they're
Interesting.
trying to put some money into it. You want to be able to find them on the internet. And then, simple things like, their paperwork should be either a digital grid or at least a grid with a business name on it. Stay away from the guys that literally use spiral notebooks.
Okay.
Don't use those guys. I mean, that's common
Okay.
sense, you would think.
Right. Yeah. And then people you see on TV or those, that really doesn't mean anything if someone's buying an ad on Facebook or TV.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a way to get people to call them. And is it like other businesses where there's maybe one company promoting roofing and then they just send it out to different contractors?
No, it doesn't work that way. If you're promoting on radio or TV, you're the one doing the work. So they may be using subs for their work, which is not uncommon and not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
But I gotta take a dig here. If they're on TV or radio, they're probably pretty expensive.
Yeah. Should someone have a structural engineer do the report and make suggestions on piers before they talk to a foundation company, or you guys, I assume, are qualified to do that too? I think people get nervous if someone's recommending the work that they're actually going to do. How do you work with that?
Okay, let's take that into a couple answers to that one. If you're a homeowner, in my opinion, you should get an engineer's report, even though I'm the one that wants to come out and bid the work. You can get multiple bids if you're a homeowner. And maybe if the bids are all different, you can't look at the dollar amount. You have to look at the scope of work. The dollar amount's always going to be different. Everybody charges different, but look at the scope of work. And it needs to be relatively the same. And if you have someone recommending 10 piers and someone recommending 20 and someone recommending 30, you really should just go to an engineer.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put fear in the audience's minds, but there are good engineers and there are bad engineers. Right. There are aggressive and there are passive engineers. And you want one that's kind of in the middle. You don't want one that's too passive, one that's too aggressive. Right. So I would start, as a homeowner, I would start with getting a couple of bids, and maybe best connections that the audience should have is a real estate agent, because they have people they deal with, and then get that company and maybe find one more. You don't have to get three. Everyone says three. You don't necessarily have to get three if the first two kind of match up.
I think that's overkill too.
And if they don't match up, then you can go ahead and get an engineer. As a seller or a buyer on a property, I think you start with a foundation company. And then, again, you can always back that up with an engineering report. Now, when we come out to the property and evaluate the house and give you the scope of work and a dollar amount, and you hire us, we are legally bound to hire an engineer to come out and verify our repair.
Oh, okay.
And then once we're done with the work, the engineer has to come back and verify we did our job.
Well, so in a way there is oversight in your industry. When you said you're bound, what happens if someone doesn't do that? I mean, who's going to know?
Well, you're bound because legally you have to pull a permit.
Okay.
And then in real estate,
okay.
like we're a real estate transaction company. We primarily only deal with real estate agents. We don't market to the homeowner,
Right.
the general public. We're pretty much only going after real estate agents. But lender required repairs, you have to have an engineer's report if you're selling that house with a foundation issue. There has to be an engineer involved. So if we fix a house, you have to have an engineer. Now, if I want to fix a homeowner's house and I want to risk not pulling a permit, which is technically against the law, then I cannot do an engineering report. But if I'm going to do the right thing and the correct thing and follow the rules, then I have to pull a permit in almost every single city in DFW. And the only way to pull a permit, again, because there's no such thing as licensed foundation contractors, you have to have a licensed engineer submit the paperwork, and that's how you pull a permit.
Okay. And you have several engineers you work with, I would imagine?
Yes, we have, technically we have 4.
All right.
And I have several others I can reach out to, but 4 is who's in our call list.
How many repairs would you do just roughly throughout the year?
So I would say average 3 a day.
Okay. Now, one of the things that we've got, as Jason mentioned, we've got a property right now where we had a real big discrepancy between the cost of the foundation work on the first, when the original foundation guy came out. We said, look, let's get another bid on it, and you said it was because they had set their high point too high. Explain the high point, and what are you looking for when you set that high point?
Okay, it'd be the reference point. So when you draw the house up, you come inside the house and you take a machine, it's called a zip level, and you just zero the machine out. So you start a benchmark.
Okay.
And you start taking elevations throughout the entire house, and you see where the elevations differ.
Okay.
And where the elevations differ, assuming there's damage in that area, then you would want to raise that area. Unfortunately, most foundation companies go off the elevations of the house rather than the physical damage. Damage is key. If there's no damage, what am I trying to fix?
Right.
Because everyone assumes a house is perfectly level. They're not. They don't exist. They're not ever perfectly level. They're always,
especially here in Texas.
Yeah. Well, even a brand new build is not zeros across the board. You may have an inch and a half slope in a brand new house that was poured yesterday. Just everyone assumes they're flat. They're not. And you can have a house that may for argument's sake, let's say it looks like a little dome. And this corner actually has damage over here, but if I zero on that highest point of the property, then I can show that the entire perimeter is down. We need to raise the entire perimeter. But if I look at the damage of the property, which again, damage is key, then I know that I've only got to fix that one corner because that's the only area that shows signs of movement, regardless of what the elevations say.
Right.
And then on his house, the one we looked at, yes, it looks like the 0 point is almost always, or the reference point, the benchmark, is almost always in the center of the house. You can zero anywhere you want. You can zero on your neighbor's roof if you want. But typically it's in the center of the house. Well,
so it doesn't mean that that's the highest point.
No, it's just a spot you
so I
choose
call
to
it a
put.
high point for some reason.
Well,
so it's this.
Now, in this case, they zeroed in the highest point of the property.
Okay.
They would to have re-zeroed and redrawn the property, because no one's going to walk into the property and put their reference point where they put it. It's just in an odd spot. So I know that they, more than likely, I don't know for sure, but more than likely, they drew their house up and said, hey, if I move this reference point over here, then I can recommend more work based on the elevations.
It's important to know. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I thought it is what it is. All foundation companies are looking at the same thing, but it's obviously not.
Not even close.
Really?
Yeah. Sad, but.
Yeah. Okay. So if you had 3 companies come in just out of the blue, would they typically all be pretty similar? And then if someone comes in and they've got needs 15 piers versus a company that says you need 4, 2 that you need 4, and say one that you needs 15, something's wrong with that 15, probably.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree with that. Whoever the two, if you pick three companies, the two that are the closest to each other are more than likely the correct ones.
Okay.
Now, if you have someone recommending 10 and someone recommending 11, that's the same repair. Someone just thought
Right,
one more
right.
pier would be better.
Right.
So it's really the gap in between them. If you have a 2 or 3 pier gap, so if I say 10 and someone says 13, that's the same repair.
Okay.
It's just a little bit different. One's
Right.
a little more, a couple more piers on it. But if you have the 10 versus the 20, that's a major gap. So I'd say anything more than 3, you have an
Okay.
argument, unless there is a really good explanation. And again, what we do is, well, I haven't said this yet, but what we do is not rocket science. It's very common sense. You just have to be educated, and we can educate you right there. It doesn't take long. It's not
Right.
hard what we do. We, the industry, want you to believe it is. So if you see someone that's got a massive gap separation, that's when you would maybe trump to the engineer.
Right. All right. Signs of, everybody knows the obvious signs are maybe step cracking outside or, major, every home's going to have major hairline cracks, in the walls or maybe where the
minor.
where molding comes together, shrinkage and expanding. But what should someone be concerned about? And that's the time to call in a foundation company.
In a perfect world, the house that they live in or that they're worried about is a brick house.
Mm-hmm.
Brick houses are so much easier to evaluate than siding houses because all the physical evidence that you need to know is going to be on the outside of the house. And yes, brick cracks. I mean, everyone looks for brick cracks, but you should be looking at the caulk joints. So where the brick meets the window, there's a caulk joint or an expansion joint, or where the brick meets a door, there's a bead of caulk. And if the house ever moves, it's going to separate that caulk line first. So look at your joints, your window joints, your expansion joints, and your door joints. That's going to tell you if your house is moving. And then when we're looking at damage, and I teach this on the class, and people start, oh wow, I never thought of that. People always want to look low at the slab itself and see if there's cracks in it. But if you have a house moves and you have a little crack right here, as that crack gets taller, it gets much bigger. So you always want to be looking high for the cracks.
Okay.
So a 2-story house will show you damage long before a 1-story house will, just because it's a much taller house and then that movement is much greater.
Interesting.
So you can catch a 2-story.
So look high, don't necessarily look low.
Yeah, who cares if there's cracks in the slab? Because every house in North Texas has got cracks somewhere in their slab. Doesn't mean it's moving. It's not bad. It's just, it could be a curing crack where it's dry, where it dries too fast and cracks.
Right.
But if the house is moving, it will separate, and it will separate like this.
Okay.
Which, if you look high, you can see it much easier.
All right. Now let's talk about piers themselves. Several types of piers, I would imagine, or not. Now.
Good question. There's not.
Oh, okay.
Now, there's 3 different types of piers, 3. And you could argue a 4th type of pier. The original way to fix a house that's still around today is called a drilled pier. That's where you drill a hole, take all the dirt out, pour concrete in the hole, and let it set for a week or so. And then once it dries, then you will raise the house up off of this pier that you've created. And you raise it the same way you do with all the piers. There's no difference in how you raise a house. The problem with drilled piers is they fail at a very high rate. They're very, the warranty is limited. About 30 to 40% of all drilled piers will eventually fail. Now, when it comes to a pier, any pier installed properly is just as good as the next. So even if it's a drilled pier, if it's installed properly, it's just as good as a pressed pier. But properly is depth. You have to get adequate depth. So in Collin County, historically, you're about 8 feet down before you hit solid rock. So really, any pier mechanism would work. You could dig down 8 feet, hit rock, stack bricks on top of each other, and then lift the house, and it will hold just as good as any pier mechanism out there. But if you're in Frisco, where it's 50 feet deep, an 8-foot drilled pier is not going to work. A drilled pier drills at an angle, so you can only go down so far. And people say, well, we can go down 16 feet. Unless you're He-Man, because eventually you've got to pull that rig out, because no one uses front-end loaders anymore. They use augers. So you can put a 4-foot bit on there, drill down 4 feet, then you extend it to another 4 foot with your bell on it and drill that down. But you've got to get that out of the ground. Unless you're He-Man, You can only go about 8 feet. Then you have the pressed concrete piling.
Just a second, let me ask you before you go to the next one. Can't you bell it at the bottom?
Yes.
Okay. And if you bell it, you don't necessarily have to hit rock, do you? I mean, I know on homes, you get down to a certain depth, you can't drill forever, and to a certain depth, then they'll bell it, put a bell on it, and how stable is that?
All drilled piers are belled.
Okay.
So they're either you drill a shaft and you put a big hole at the bottom of the shaft, and that would be your bell.
Okay.
Or you can do what's called a dual shaft, where you drill here and you drill this angle. Both of those, because they're created without any weight, then you transfer hundreds of thousands of pounds to that pier, it will sink.
Okay.
Unless it's on rock.
Right.
And it doesn't matter where it's at, it's going to sink. If you get into a shallower area that maybe not on rock, but there's no moving parts or moving soil at that depth that they get to, then you're okay.
So if someone comes in with a request for repair, you're not going to know what the depth is on that home.
No idea.
So what do you just have to, before you can even give an estimate, what do you do?
Well, we'll get into the press piers in a minute, but
Okay.
the drilled pier is always 8 feet.
Okay.
If they use a front end loader, which no one uses front end loaders, because I mean that's a tractor going in up against a house, and you're going to tear up your neighbor's yard,
Right,
and
right.
people just got away from them. So drilled piers are always at 8 feet.
Okay.
That's just where they're at.
Okay.
Most engineers that still recommend drilled piers, and all the engineers that still recommend drilled piers are much older engineers.
Mm-hmm.
They will say 12 feet or bedrock, whichever comes first. Well, no one actually drills those things to 12 feet anymore.
Okay.
The more common and the most common is a pressed concrete piling, which is what some of your TV guys call the cable lock system. Then there's the Pro Lift system. Then there's the Millennium composite system. What they've done is they've taken tissue and named it Clinics, or cotton swab and named it Q-tip. They gave it a name so they could sell it for a better price.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the most affordable way to fix a house that comes with a lifetime warranty. And with a press pier, we are driving the pier down using the weight of the house as leverage. So we get up underneath the house, we take a hydraulic ram, we bump up against the house, and we set it on our cylinders, and we engage the jack, and we're trying to raise the house up off of this cylinder. But what ultimately happens, we just shove it in the ground. So then we put another cylinder on top, and there's a piece of metal that goes in there, and then we engage the jack, and we press 2 cylinders down. 3 cylinders, 4 cylinders, 5 cylinders. Eventually, it's going to stop.
So, so you let the weight of the house itself decide how deep the pier. Okay, interesting.
And if you take it all the way to true refusal, which means you've driven that pier as deep as it can go, then the house will just start coming up off the pier, and the pier itself is no longer moving, and that is the load-bearing strata, or point of refusal.
Okay.
There's no way to go deeper at that point in time unless you massively increase the weight of the house.
Right.
And I say massively. You can put 5 or 6 cars in that corner of that house, and that might be enough weight.
Okay.
So, well, what if I put a piano over there? Nope. Or a gun safe? No, that's microbes on an anthill. It's nothing.
And what do those piers look like? How wide are they, and what are they made of?
The concrete cylinders look like a roll of paper towels.
Okay.
About the same size. They're 6-inch diameter, and they're about that big around.
Okay.
And that's what we put in the ground. And of course, then we come to the top, put a cap on it, and raise the house. Concrete in most slabs is around 3,000 psi. The cylinders we're using to press to raise the house are 9,000 psi. So they're already 3 times stronger than the concrete we're using.
Yeah. And then the third type of pier you said after press is?
It's still a press pier, but rather than a concrete piling, it's called a steel piling or steel pier. So rather than a 6-inch diameter concrete cylinder, we're using 3-inch steel cylinders.
Okay.
And the 3-inch steel cylinders, unless they're coming from India, they're almost always X drill tubing. So what you use to drill an oil well, then we cut them in sections and we drive those in the ground. That's what we're using.
Any strength difference in the compression between the concrete and the steel? Is that a big deal? I mean, people say, well, how much, like, cost-wise, what's the difference?
Well, there's a big cost difference in steel versus concrete. Steel is technically stronger, goes deeper. You could argue it's going to last a little longer. but it's drastically overkill. You
Okay.
generally don't need a steel pier unless you're driving through sand, not a lot of
Okay.
sand in
Yeah,
DFW,
right.
or lifting a structure that actually could outweigh the PSI of your concrete. Then you have to switch to a steel pier, because steel piers are around 20 to 25,000 PSI versus 9.
Okay.
So if I'm lifting a very heavy structure, I might switch to steel. And in some cases, if we're backing up to a lake or a big ravine or a creek or something, we might want to push steel on that one as opposed to concrete.
Okay.
Steel piers are more expensive simply because a 1-foot cylinder of steel is like $7. A concrete cylinder is like $2.
Mm-hmm.
And the average depth of the pier is about 15.
So it's about 3 times more expensive steel than.
It
would you
should
say?
be.
Okay.
We're actually only about 30% more.
Okay.
So actually, we charge $150 more for steel piers, and a lot of companies treat them like they're plated in gold or something. I mean, they're charging 5 times what their concrete. Well, not 5 times, 3 times what their concrete cylinders are charging. And they say because we can get more depth, and you can get more depth with a steel pier, but that's because it's 3 inches as opposed to 6.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with it. It's steel.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a smaller cylinder. And let's say we go deeper, so we're going to charge you more money. Plus the material cost more, so we're going to charge you more money. And I'm like, but I can carry 6 to 8 concrete cylinders in a wheelbarrow. Now these are coming from the trailer to the pier site, and so it takes a lot of moving of the material to get a house fixed. But I can move 20 to 25 steel cylinders in a wheelbarrow.
Mm-hmm.
If I've got a really big job, I can carry 2 pallets of concrete cylinders on a trailer, but I can carry 4 steel pallets on a trailer.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's easier for us to push steel than it is concrete,
Right.
even though the material cost is a little more. But I really push concrete because it's overkill.
Right.
In most cases, it's overkill to put a steel pier in, especially in Collin County. It's just kind of silly in Collin County to push a steel pier in most cases.
And the plugs, I kind of envision a plug, a cylinder plug. What keeps those things from breaking off themselves? Well, I mean, there's got to be rebar or something in them. How wide are they? What keeps them from just shattering when that?
You're talking about the steel?
No, the concrete. Yeah.
Well, there is a piece of rebar that goes in.
So they're
between them.
reinforced with rebar.
No, they're not reinforced.
Oh.
No, it's just a very strong piece of concrete, stronger
Okay.
than what you
Okay.
have. So like, again, 3 times stronger than the concrete in your house, and we know how strong the
Okay.
house concrete is.
Right.
And this is 3 times that.
Okay.
It's just a different concrete that's very strong. So yeah, in some cases the cylinder can crack, or really what happens is it explodes, but that usually does that when they haven't cured long enough.
Okay.
And that's really only in major busy
And is there a
times.
lot of companies that, where do you get your concrete piers from, the plugs, whatever they're?
The cylinders?
Yeah, cylinders.
Everybody gets them from the same spot.
Okay.
There's 2 major distributors in Dallas, and
Okay.
everybody gets them from the same spot.
Okay.
Finishing the house today here in Allen, and the homeowner elected to go with steel in a shallower area, but that's okay. We give them the information.
Right.
They get
They
to choose
decide.
what they want,
Yeah.
and he went with steel. And even though we've done a lot of steel piers with this India steel, is the first time that I've actually been on site and saw them, and they just look so much better. They're gray rather than rusty. The crew chief said those are the best cylinders I've ever used. We didn't have to tear them apart or anything. They're just perfect. I went, great. So they're just a better material right now.
Talk about warranty. One of the things that we were really impressed with is you've got the lifetime warranty, correct?
Yes.
And it's transferable.
Yes.
How many times is it transferable?
For us, as many times as you want.
Okay.
So-
That's very unusual, folks.
Yeah, warranties. Unfortunately, I know I'm in a crooked industry, and I would call it crooked. We're not, but I would call it a little crooked. Warranties. Let's talk about the warranty transfer. The warranty transfer. The only reason why you transfer a warranty is in hopes to get out of the warranty, because you know people are not going to transfer it. I would say your big companies.
Interesting. Let me think about that. So the reason they put them on there is because people will forget to transfer them.
Yep.
And then when they sell the house and the new owner goes to try to get that warranty, the obligations on it, they say, no, you didn't do it in time, or
Yep.
wow.
So if I fix your house, you have a lifetime warranty on that house as long as you own it.
That's pretty impressive.
Now, the moment you sell that house, I get to void the warranty if you don't sign it over to another person.
Mm-hmm.
That's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you sell me your car right now and we exchange title and then tomorrow it breaks down, I take it to the dealership, they pull the VIN number and they say, hey, this is under warranty. We're going to take care of this for you. They don't ask if we transferred paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
There's none of that happening. It stays with the car. I called a really good engineer buddy of mine, and I said, why? And this is when I first started the company, because I had a transfer in the beginning, and I just asked him, why do companies transfer warranties? He goes, I have no idea. I said, well, good, because I'm going to stop doing it. That's a great idea. So with us, the warranty stays with the property indefinitely. There's no transfer policy. There's no way to transfer it. If you're the seller on the home and the buyer wants the warranty in their name, then we just write a piece of paper and hand it to them. You have the warranty now in your name, but it stays with the property, and you can transfer it many times as you want.
As long as you're in business, that warranty's good.
As long as I'm in business, and that's with any company. As long as the company's in business, the warranty's good. If the company goes out of business, the warranty's void.
Okay.
And there's no protection. There's a big company out there that says that they're backed by the state of Texas, which doesn't exist. It's the name of a trust fund. There is nobody out there helping you. If I go out of business, the warranties are gone.
Right.
Same thing with every company.
Let's talk again. Obviously, not naming companies, but there are a lot of tricks of the trade and things that happen in the background in real estate. So I know they got to be in foundation repair too. Where are some of the ways that you can get hurt? You're not getting your money's worth, or you're actually getting bamboozled by a foundation company.
Well, first, changing the elevations.
Okay.
Now, I have recently, over the last couple of years, seen where the elevations were incorrect. So you literally wrote down incorrect elevations, but most of the time that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Most of the time people don't write or lie about the elevations they're writing down. They'll just move the reference point. So we know that part. One of the scary things with your big boys generally don't do this, but your mom and pop shops do, is if I am driving a pier down and that house starts to move, we're getting close to refusal, but we're not at refusal yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a lightweight structure. Let's say it's just a one-story framed house, just your typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath, little bitty, 1,500 square foot house. Those things don't weigh a lot. So I can start getting that house to move driving 3 or 4 feet when I need to be driving 15 feet. So once I can get that house to move, then I can stop pushing the pier, and then I can lift it and shim it. And I can raise the house. It's just not going to hold there very long. So I can go, most houses, almost any house other than your really heavy ones. And it doesn't mean it doesn't have to be a big house to be a heavy house. It can be a 1,500 square foot house that weighs as much as a 2-story, 5,000 square foot house. It all has to do with the amount of concrete that's actually in the house. But in most cases, I can dig underneath there. I can take a $8 bag of Quikrete, wet it down, cut a hole in it, wet it down, let it dry, and then I can raise your house. It's just not going to hold.
Yeah.
So deal with a legitimate company that's, it's got some really good reviews and that honors warranties, and every once in a while you need to walk outside and make sure they're driving these cylinders in the ground.
Okay. Anything else that you would say watch out for with foundation companies?
Yeah, again, this is hard to imagine if especially for the audience, because if they've never been associated with a foundation repair, it's hard to believe this, but what we do is very elementary. It's very common sense oriented. You see a car with a flat tire. What's wrong with the car? It's got a flat tire. Fix the flat tire. There's nothing wrong with it. Use common sense. Don't take the salesman's word for it. If it doesn't make common sense, it's probably wrong. If the corner's down, the elevations are down and you have damage in that corner, then we know we're going to have to fix that corner. Now, the number of piers may be different, but we know that's the area. If you don't have any damage anywhere else and you had no concerns, but the elevations are down, then don't worry about it. You live in the house. You know what's wrong with it. You may not know how much it's going to cost or how much is being affected, but you know the area that's moving. And just use common sense. Elementary common sense is what I call it. Don't get sold by the salesman.
Don't necessarily take the most expensive because you think they're doing the best job and other people aren't doing that. I think that's a great two people, and if they're close, that's probably the best way to do it. I was going to ask you too about what happens if you have to go down, and I've had a couple of homes that they had the problem in the middle of the home. They had to actually drill out through the kitchen, and the guy got down there underneath, and it was a mess. And then we talk about plumbing too. Is that something you got to be careful of? If you lift, it could crack a plumbing pipe. How do they protect themselves on that? How do you protect yourself that there's a plumbing leak and they blame the foundation company, but it's not our fault. We raised it and to get it to the level. How do you handle that?
That's very good. Let's talk about interior piers. Sometimes the entire interior of a house will fall, but if that's the case, the outside's more than likely already been piered. But in some cases, if a house falls, back up. If a house falls like this, you put piers out here and you just raise it up. But if it falls like this, you can't just raise the outside because then it looks like this.
Right.
You have to actually have lifting points on the inside to raise the whole thing up simultaneously. So sometimes you have to have interior piers. And yes, they are very messy. They're scary because it's a jackhammer in your house. It's a cubic yard of dirt per hole that we have to pull out of the house, and we generally will leave the dirt in the house. We don't wheelbarrow it all the way out. Now, we have a lot of interior piers. We do have to wheelbarrow a lot of the dirt out. Then we have to bring it back in. So it's, messy. You can get wheelbarrow.
By that, you mean like when I saw there was a big pile of dirt right next to where they were?
Yeah.
What you're saying is, but after that's done, then the dirt comes back?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Once we're done, we clean up really well. And if we're doing interior piers, and here's something that I love telling customers, and every one of them laugh and they understand is, we'll put the plastic up and we try to minimize the dust, and here's the truth. The plastic is to give you the illusion we're trying to minimize the dust. It's going to be dusty. It's going to be messy. But we clean up really good. And for us, for Elite, the only thing we can actually control, because we don't know how much we're going to be able to raise that house. We don't know if the cracks are going to close together. We don't know what damage is going to happen until you do it. But the one thing we can control is the cleanup. And we are really good at cleanup because that's the only thing we truly can control.
Right.
Now let's talk about plumbing. So anytime you do a foundation repair, now we're talking slabs, it's very wise, and I would highly recommend even on a pier and beam doing plumbing tests, but a lot of companies don't because the plumbing's exposed. You can see it. So, when a house is down, you're going to raise this back up. Well, the plumbing pipes are in the ground. They're not in the concrete. So when we raise this, the house is coming up, but the pipe is staying in the ground. So did the fall cause the plumbing leak, or did the raising cause the plumbing leak? We don't know. The pipe's not going to come up if it's stuck in the ground, but it could have been pushed down because of the foundation failure. And people always ask, what is the percentage of plumbing leaks after a foundation repair? And it's 1 in 3.
Okay.
30% of
That's
all
good.
homes after a foundation repair is going to develop some sort of plumbing issue. Most plumbing issues are not horrible unless it's a cast iron house. Now, if it's cast iron, you can breathe on that pipe now, it'll break. And the last 4 years, it's extremely common just to replumb. That's where we're getting these $30,000, $40,000 bids to replumb a house because the plumbing is just gone. It's just barely even hanging on. But if it's PVC, usually we just have to get under there and reconnect the pipe, and it is expensive, but it's not these big numbers. We just did one actually we're doing one in Fort Worth next week. It's $2,200, $2,200, which is Yes, that's a big number, but it's not your $30,000 or $40,000 is what people keep hearing.
Right.
Our company does a lot of pre-tests, and that means we test the plumbing before we do the foundation. And it's always recommended. Every company actually has it in their diagrams or their contracts that you should do a pre-test, but most companies don't. We do pre-tests, and what I have found is that 1 in 3 houses have plumbing leaks.
Okay.
So the reality is 30% of all houses have plumbing leaks now, whether they've had foundation problems or
Really?
not.
Really?
Kind of scary, but that's the reality.
And how do you test for? I've always wondered. I have no idea how you do a plumbing test. How do you do it?
It's called a hydrostatic line test. Hydrostatic means weighted water. You're just going to fill the sewer lines up with water, and you're going to see if the water table drops. So most houses have clean outs, and those are the 2 little sticks,
right.
pipes right outside your front door in most cases. They're in your flower bed.
Uh-huh.
Those are your clean outs. And then that's where all the water in the house goes through those clean outs and then to the city sewer. So you plug up the clean outs with a balloon, and you fill your sewer lines up with water. If the water table drops, you have a plumbing leak. If it doesn't, you don't. And it's that simple. In the real estate industry...
A second, when you said when the water table drops, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Sorry. So you fill the sewer lines up with water, and what you're doing is you go to a shower or you go to a toilet. You take the toilet off the ground so you can see the flange.
Okay.
If there's a shower right next to it, then they'll use the shower flange.
Okay.
And they fill the sewer lines all the way up to the top of the flange or to the bottom of the shower or the top of the flange of the toilet, and then they turn the water off. And then they just sit there and wait for 20 minutes and see if it drops. If it drops, you have a leak. If it doesn't, you don't.
Okay.
And it's that simple.
So you do that before all your jobs?
Most of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, because we're mostly real estate, sometimes we're limited by time. You guys have, it's gone crazy.
Yeah.
I remember when it was 10 business days, and then it went to 7 business days. That's okay. Now we're getting 3 and 5 days, period.
Yeah.
So we got to get that information immediately and get the house fixed. And sometimes we don't have time to do a pre-test, but if we do have adequate time and someone says, hey, we're closing in 2 weeks, can you get this done? Then we'll generally go ahead and do a pre-test.
Right. Okay.
You were talking in the class about the different types of cracks that you might see and which ones indicate like a foundation issue and which ones are just normal.
So this would be good for your homeowners that maybe don't have a real estate agent that they can call. So if you're looking around the interior, now the exterior, if it's a brick home, look at the exterior, look at the separations, always look high. Yes, you can look for cracks. Don't worry about the little bitty crack. That means nothing. Look for the crack you can stick your finger in the brick. But look at your joints, your window joints, your expansion joints. Look at the freeze boards. That's the crown molding on the outside of the house. But on the interior of the house, we get calls all the time for, vertical cracks above a window, above a door or something. Vertical cracks mean nothing. That doesn't tell you a thing. That's just a vertical crack. That could be a wind so hard blowing the house that it causes a vertical crack. That could be the weight distribution of the second story, because today most of the houses are very open floor plans, and there's a lot of weight on the walls. It will cause vertical cracks. Vertical cracks mean nothing whatsoever. If you have a horizontal crack, that runs this direction for a while, not a big deal. If you have a lot of horizontal cracks, you either have a drainage problem or a sewer line leak underneath your house. Definitely give us a call first before we panic and go to the plumber, but give us a call if you have a lot of horizontal cracks. Again, only vertical cracks, don't worry about it. Okay. Differential movement, where we're going to recommend piers, is going to be diagonal. If you have a lot of diagonal cracks, your house is falling in one area or another, and we need to pier it or stop it from moving. And then I did get a question from a realtor during a class, is, well, I have a vertical, then I have a horizontal, then I have a vertical, and then I have a horizontal.
Step crack.
Okay, that is a diagonal crack. It just cracked like this.
Okay.
So if you have this, don't think you have nothing. That is the same as a diagonal crack, and then you have differential movement.
How about sticking doors? When you start noticing doors sticking, is that...
That can be. Now, sticking doors on a second story, can't trust them. Again, open floor plans, you're going to have sagging in the second story. There's nothing you can do about it, nothing you need to do about it. Just make a door adjustment. If you have a door that's just not shutting or rubbing, sticking a little bit,
Never had a problem with it, then all of a sudden it starts sticking.
then you probably are starting. But there usually, almost always, there will be other signs.
Okay.
But if you have doors sticking, yes, give us a call and then we'll come out and take a look at it. Your front door, your back door, and your garage door, those are going to be the heavier burglar doors that are solid. Most people's doors are actually hollow except for those 3 doors, and they're very heavy, and sometimes they'll just detach from the 2x4s and the hinges will become loose, and that's all it is. So if you have no other evidence but your front door, your back door, or your garage door is not shutting properly, just see if it's a loose hinge.
Okay.
Because you have no diagonal cracks.
Yeah.
There's no separations outside. I got this one door not working. Maybe it's the door.
Yeah. Okay.
And on the door, you can kind of see the
the reveal?
actual, yeah.
So the space above the door, so you have your frame and then you have your door, then you have a little space above the door. That's called the reveal. And if it makes a diagonal angle, whichever side that arrow is pointing to is the low side. So if you have a frame, so when houses fall, doors don't do this. They turn into parallelograms. And then at the top of the door, you'll get from the reveal, it'll tell you which direction the house is going. So if the house falls like this, then the frame does this, then you have a reveal like this. Again, if it falls like this, then the door shifts like this, and then you have a reveal like this.
Okay.
And that means I need to lift this side up, and then that framework does this to this. But they don't shift like that. They turn into parallelograms.
Okay.
And you said that the garage is the one that kind of is going to show the foundation issues first in a lot of cases?
Yeah, the outside wall of a garage. Now, in most cases, you have a house with a garage built into it, so you have one outside wall. That is the weakest wall of any house. Hands down, there's no area that's weaker. And the reason is because there's nothing joining that wall to the rest of the house, and it's supporting roof lines. So if it shifts a little bit, that wall will rotate out, then we need to pier it. And it's very common to put 2 piers on the corner of a garage. Now, in some cases, you have 2 outside walls. Now you have 2 of the weakest points in a house, because if you have a square house with an extended garage, those become even weaker. So a garage is always a good place to look. Is look at the caulk joint where the brick is, and there's a board before your garage door. If that wall separates, there's a bead of caulk right there. And again, just look at that.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. When you started out, you didn't take, did you just experience by working on jobs? I mean, did anybody ever teach a class, this is what you have to look for? This, are there any courses? How do people learn what we just learned right here? I mean, when they're starting a foundation repair business.
Hopefully you're not starting a repair as a rookie, or starting a business as a rookie. You're actually working for someone.
Yeah.
Yes, you can go to the Foundation Repair Association and you can take some classes, but that's just not classes. Those are going to be more like you're sitting in a room for an hour and listen to someone talk. And they'll walk you through a few things, but really hands-on is what you need.
Okay.
So when I was trained, I just rode with a guy and we just went through 100 houses and we drew the house up, showed me what damage to look for, and then we went and took the elevations, and then we compared the elevations to where the damage is, and then we recommended work. So it's really just learning over and over and over to do that.
Okay.
I don't know another business like that, but imagine you want to become a mechanic, but they don't have mechanic schools. You would just go work for a mechanic, and then you would see a problem, and the mechanic would fix it, and you would learn it, then you'd see it again to a point where, okay, I can fix that. I don't need the mechanic stuff, but I've seen it done so many times, I can do it now.
But you don't want to be the person that walks in and everything's a new experience. They've never seen it before. They don't know how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. You want to get to the point. You've seen pretty much everything. I'm sure. Yeah. Sure, by now you probably have.
Well, like the youngest guy on my staff, my opinion's our best. He had 0 experience, and I just knew that he would be really good at what we do because a lot of it's personality, the intangibles. Are you smart? Yes. Do you know common sense? Yes. Okay, I can teach you this and you'd be really good at it. I trained him for a year. Mm-hmm. I guaranteed a salary for him for an entire year and taught him everything I know, and then he flourished and he's doing really good. We have 3 full crews and we have 5 salesmen including me, and then I have a marketing girl. and then we have an office staff. We do funding at closing, so we will fix the house and take the proceeds at closing. That is on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I would imagine.
We are a cash flow style business, but we can do funding at closing.
Okay. And you just, I guess you have to make sure the home is priced reasonably, and they're not trying to hit something that the home's never going to sell. It's priced so high that you have to make that determination, I would imagine, too, don't you?
Yeah, we kind of do. I mean, sometimes we'll ask the question to the real estate. The biggest thing that we look for or ask, it depends on the situation. I mean, you kind of have an idea when you look at the house and look, because you're inside people's houses when you're doing this, is are they behind on their payments? Mm-hmm. If they're not behind on their payments, do have financing set aside if someone just needs financing. So let's say it's a homeowner not selling and they need their house fixed. We do have financing.
Oh,
it's
okay.
very fair, non-contractor financing. So there's no markup, there's no limitations on what you can get. You just go get it.
Okay.
But we have contacts for them to get financing.
You said something that really resonated with me, and I've never heard anybody else say that, but it's our policy too. We were talking about when you meet with customers, and you don't want to share, if someone's come in and given them a bid on something, you said again, I don't need to see that. You don't even need to show it to me.
No.
And explain why.
So if you're getting bids on a property, it's okay to share the scope of work, or you can share what someone else did. I wouldn't. I would say let each individual do their job, and once they've done their job, once they've come up with the dollar amount and they've given you their scope, then you can bring somebody else's paperwork in. Never ever give a contractor the cost, because all we have to do is beat the cost and we're probably going to get the job.
Thank you so much for spending your time here on a Friday. We really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you. Sir.